these days when we are overwhelmed by a tsunami of quackery. It's coming good at all angles. You check them. It's like by the other guy. Okay, any better? Is it any better? There are a lot of snake oil salesmen out there who are applying their trade. And of course, it encompasses all kinds of areas. You have the dietary supplements, you have the fake drugs, you have the allegations that specific to. Okay.
Try now?
Okay, maybe that's it. Yeah, fixed. Okay. Anyway, if you can't hear, you can pretend you do. All right, so our task really is to replace all the snake oil salesmen there with proper science. And do this in many ways, but I have a particular allegiance to Sherlock Holmes. Why? Because of the classic statement in book, which is this one. We mustn't theorize before we have the facts, right? This is really the essence of science. Whenever we come to some sort of conclusion, it has to be based upon facts, not upon hearsay and not upon emotion. This is very challenging these days because we are living in the era of information explosion. It is coming at us from every angle. There's the social media, the newspapers, radio, television, and we're just inundated with information from all angles. And it is also, unfortunately, besides being the age of information, it is also the age of misinformation. Because there's so much information that is targeting us that is simply wrong. Now, usually one can tell. For example, we don't really listen a lot to the flat earth people because science has proven not long ago that the earth is not flat. I don't think we listen all that much to all of the tabloids because these tend to be somewhat comical, and I don't think anyone actually believes those headlines that what they are entertaining. But it isn't always that easy to know what is misinformation. For example, the Orange Demon's love affair with hydroquinone last year, or I guess it was now more last year, it was 5 years ago, right? When in the midst of COVID, he suggested that hydroxychloroquine would be the answer. What are you to say about this? I mean, here's someone who supposedly has some authoritative knowledge, even though maybe lacking intelligence, but is capable of repeating what he may have heard. So how are we to know whether or not there's any substance to this? Well, the way we know is by relying on the science of the literature. At the beginning, it was not totally impossible that hydroxychloroquine would have some effect. You can't say that until you've done the experiments. Well, the experiments have been done, and they were done even while all of this nonsense was being said. And it has now been clearly shown that hydroxychloroquine has no effect on COVID-19. So there is some misinformation that we can now put in the grave because enough proper scientific information has come out to show that it has no effect. So misinformation is information that is just wrong. And sometimes you can demonstrate this as we just did. But then there's another even more worrisome aspect to this whole business, and that is disinformation. So what is disinformation? This is spreading misinformation with the full knowledge that it is wrong, right? So, well, spreading misinformation can be kind of innocuous. So when people just automatically do that, you get an email that kind of sounds plausible and gets forwarded to your friends without really looking into it. That happens. But in this case, these are people who know that what they are saying is wrong. Let me give you an example. And it's an example that really is an interesting one because it does come up in everyday life. Almost every night, if you watch CNN or indeed many of the major networks, you will see ads for this. You'll see the #1 pharmacist recommended brand. I mean, that #1, this is ridiculous in the first place. I mean, have they surveyed all pharmacists to see what they're going to do? Of course not. Just be taken out of nothing. Anyway, it is, Prevagen, of course, is supposed treatment for memory problems. And you've probably heard this enough times coming out of your TV. You might take something for your heart, your joints, your digestion. So why wouldn't you take something for the most important part of your brain? The ingredient, if you found in jellyfish, healthier brain, better life. Well, it sounds good. And of course, we would like to somehow improve our brain function. Well, they go on to tell you that the magical ingredient is something that is found in jellyfish, apoacarin, and it is a calcium-binding protein, and it will also rail off sort of scientific-sounding stuff about how it might work. Because it is true that there can be some calcium metabolism in the brain that leads to mental problems, but this is a very complex issue, and just binding the calcium in the brain is not the answer. So anyway, they give you this song and dance, and then of course they claim that this Prevagen will improve your memory and overcome all of this. Well, the fact is that the supposed active ingredient, for which there's no real evidence, so never mind that, the apoacarin is a protein. And as any other protein, it will be digested as soon as it gets into your stomach. It could never make it into the bloodstream. So this whole idea is physiologically not possible. Even if there were some activity in this protein, if it were able to get into the brain, there's no way it can get into the brain because it can get digested in the stomach. Another interesting further nuance is, of course, they play up the whole idea that this is found in jellyfish, as if that were somehow, indicative of efficacy. Well, so what if it's something that's found in jellyfish? I mean, are jellyfish known to have superior intelligence and memory? No, I mean, this is nonsense. But in any case, the fact is that the apoacarin that they put into this product is not extracted from jellyfish. It is made in the lab. Not that it matters, but of course they play this nonsensical game because people think that something that is found in nature is automatically good for us. Well, where do they get any kind of data on which to base their support? I mean, they talk about this thing being clinically proven. What does that mean? It means that they've done something that we call data mining. What is that? It means that you collect enough data from enough people, and you look for specific patterns that may not be present when you look at the whole population. So maybe you don't see anything when you're looking at people between the ages of 20 and 80. Maybe you don't see anything when you look at females between the age of 30 and 40. But maybe if you isolate a group of men between the ages of 60 and 70, maybe something comes up. So what they do is they just investigate all of the data. So there was a study in which they fed Prevagen to volunteers, and then they did mental tests on them. Most of it showed absolutely nothing, no effect. But then you go and do some data mining, and you find a small subgroup where just by chance alone there is a positive result. And of course, you then type that out. And that's exactly what they did here. And this is the conclusion from their own study. While no statistically significant results were observed over the entire study population, that's the key, right? There were statistically significant results in two subgroups. These were two small groups, subgroups of a few people with a specific age. This is meaningless in terms of science. And the fact is that there is just no evidence that this works. That's all there is to it. All we require in science is evidence. There isn't any. And this has gone so far as to raise the ire of some lawmakers. And as you can see, the Attorney General of New York has come down with the ruling that this is a quack product. But does that mean that you're going to stop seeing advertising on TV? No, because there's no requirement for any kind of advertising on TV to prove efficacy. There just isn't. So you can choose your words carefully, which they do, and make all kinds of claims, none of which is scientifically substantiated. So this really brings up the question of to whom we should listen, right? I mean, why is it that we don't listen to the promoters of religion? Because it is not science-based. So what we have to look for is, of course, the scientific evidence. It's something that we talk about over and over again. But where do we find scientific evidence? Basically, we find it in the scientific journals. And just to give a capsule view of the way that science works, a researcher or a group of researchers will carry out a study. They write down the results, they analyze the results, they have a discussion about the results, submit this in the form of a paper to the editor of a journal, who then sends it out to 2 or 3 reviewers who are experts in the field. And there's a lot of back and forth, maybe asking for more data, looking for a different interpretation. And eventually a decision is made on whether or not it should be published or not. It's not a foolproof system, because of course the referees do not redo the experiment, so they have to accept that whatever was written is what was found, and that all the data were legitimately conducted. If someone is going to be fraudulent, you're not going to detect that until someone tries to actually repeat the work. And this is how that work, the paper by Andrew Wakefield that linked vaccination to autism got into the literature. Because it is impossible to know just from reading a paper whether or not they're lying or not. They were lying about the data. That was all part of it. So yes, we do look in the scientific world, we look to the scientific literature for evidence. But this is not what happens in the general population. These days, where does the general population get information? Mostly from the social media. You get it from Instagram, you get it from Facebook, you get it from TikTok, you get it from all of the wire services who have websites, etc. What all of these have in common is that they are essentially non-referee, because it's impossible to referee the internet. So basically anyone can post anything that they want, unless they're caught posting something slanderous, and then eventually something will be done. But it's really a free-for-all. And some of these influencers, as they call themselves, are very good at influencing others. One of my favorite boogie women out there is the food babe. This very pretty lady who has zero background in science, has thousands and thousands of followers on the internet who subscribe to her dogma, things like, if you can't pronounce it, you should not be eating it. So she would be horrified if I offered her some beta fructose off of the group of her website. I think she would start running in the opposite direction, but that's just a chemical name for sugar. Now, there are many reasons not to eat sugar, certainly not to overconsume sugar. but the fact that it has a multisyllabic chemical name is not one of those reasons. She goes beyond this. She asks the question, do you eat beaver butt? Well, where on earth does this come from? This connection to beaver butt? Well, beavers actually have a set of glands beside their anus from which they secrete a liquid that they use to attract mates, that is to mark their. And it's a complex mixture of different compounds. But interestingly enough, some of these compounds that are found in this beaver secretion can be used to make commercially important substances. For example, artificial vanilla flavoring or vanillin. In theory, it can be made from the compounds that are found in beaver gland extract. And there have been papers published on this. But those are only of academic interest to show this rather interesting, curious relationship between extracts of beaver glands and how these could be used to make something like vanillin. It doesn't mean that it is being done. There is no vanillin made from beaver butt extract in ice cream. I mean, this is just nonsense. First of all, it would be far, far too expensive to do that. And why would you do that when vanillin, the stuff that they use to make artificial vanilla flavoring, is easily made from extracts of wood, from a compound called lignin in wood, which is converted into vanillin. So this idea of asking people if you would eat beaver butt, I mean, of course it can generate headlines, but it is total nonsense. No, we're not eating beaver butt. Neither are we eating any kind of secretion of the beaver. It is just not used to make artificial vanilla flavoring, although in theory it could be. But even if you were to eat beaver butt, so what? We're not reviled by the idea of eating cow butt, right? We just call it steak, right? So what is so wrong with the thinking of eating beaver butt? I mean, it's just not part of our diet, but there's nothing really wrong with it. Anyway, this woman, the food babe, in spite of all this nonsense, is constantly asked to appear on TV as if she were an expert, which is really quite ridiculous. And Time magazine has called her one of the most influential people on the internet. Someone with no scientific background. I mean, this is scary business. So what I decided to do is to try to educate her a little bit. I sent her a book. In fact, I sent her 2 books. I sent her this one and this one. I haven't got any thanks for this. But if I were to send out these books, I mean, there's a whole giant population out there who should be recipients of this. I mean, I should have sent some to our pal Gwyneth Paltrow as well, because she is also incredibly laden with misinformation. Every single nutritionist, doctor, and health conscious person I've ever come across seems to concur that gluten is tough on system and many of us are best intolerant of it and most urge to it. That's total nonsense. Gluten is a very serious problem for people who suffer from celiac disease. This is roughly 1% of the population. They have to scrupulously stay away from gluten. For the rest of the population, it's an innocuous substance. It is a protein that is found in wheat. But they have managed to create this scenario that gluten is some toxic substance and you should stay away from it. Her nonsense doesn't stop there. She also thinks that oregano oil wards off colds and magnesium pills that sure sleep, strained with glorious silver escapes off germs, etc. None of this is scientifically valid. Why would anyone listen to Gwyneth Paltrow? Because she's famous. And people think that famous people somehow have access to knowledge that most of us have no access to. Well, Gwyneth, of course, has many other strange names, such as putting ozone gas up the rectum, putting jade eggs into the body orifices that are not designed for receptacles of jade eggs. A lot of ridiculous things. But she's very personable. She says these things with great conviction. She smiles, she sounds legitimate. And people buy into this. Even worse, perhaps, is Anthony William, who labels himself a medical medium. Zero scientific background, zilch. That has not stopped him from publishing books that appear in the New York Times bestseller list. He also has a radio show from Florida where he answers questions about health and gives advice to people. How does he do this? Isn't that practicing medicine without a license? It is, but he's got an explanation. The advice doesn't come from him. It comes from a spirit. The spirit of a departed physician with whom he is in contact. And it is this entity that actually gives the advice. So he's not doing anything except interpreting what he hears. Well, there are two things. He hears things. Either he's schizophrenic or he's lying, right? There's no other option here. Because spirits do not exist. But this spirit actually sends a very interesting message no matter what the ailment is. And that is to drink celery juice. This is the miracle. And in fact, he's got a whole book on celery juice saying all of the beneficial things that it can do. There's nothing wrong with drinking celery juice, except for its back on the taste buds. But it is not a drug that is going to have any kind of health benefits. In fact, it is very high in nitrates that in the body can yield nitrosamines, which are known carcinogens, but the medium doesn't address this. Anyway, celery juice is not a cure-all. It doesn't think it's a cure. But he's a very charismatic person. Millions of followers on the internet who buy into his advice. And you may remember, it wasn't so long ago, it was 2 summers ago, when celery prices skyrocketed. It was because of this drug. Because that's when this book was came out. Anyway, talk about books. I mean, I could somehow then. What I remember is when A Grain of Salt came out, and the publisher called me and says, good, you made it to the bestseller list. So I was happy, I saw it there. But then I glanced up this bestseller list, and what do I see? I see Anthony William with a celery juice at number 5, which of course takes some of the shine up from being, on the list there at number 9. But it goes to show you that nonsense will always outsell sense. Why? Because they have answers to all the problems, which we don't. When you talk scientifically, when you're talking about the ailments, the words maybe and ifs and buts always lurch into your vocabulary. For these people, no. The medium knows everything. There's no ifs or buts. They will give you answer to the 100 answer. Now, unfortunately, when people are famous, they are somehow seen to be wiser, that they have better access to information. Madonna, for example, thinks that she's an expert on radiation. One of the biggest problems that exist in the world is nuclear waste. Well, it's a problem, it's not one of the biggest problems in the world. That's something I've been involved with for a while with a group of scientists. What the hell is she talking about? She knows nothing about radiation. What scientists would be involved with who are trying to solve this problem? And then there's Tom Cruise. the highest paid actor in the world. And he thinks that psychiatry doesn't work when you study the effects of a crime against humanity. And he, of course, is a member of the Church of Scientology, which is one of the most rigorous belief systems. And then we have Naomi Campbell, perhaps the most famous model in the world, who thinks that it's good to clean out your body once in a while. And of course, she promotes all her detox regimens. As I've told you many times before, any time that you see that word detox, you're looking at backward. And they will never mention what they are detoxing from. It's always these nebulous toxins, unnamed, that are cruising around their body that somehow with their coffee enemas or whatever are going to be withdrawn. Then you have political commentators who also venture into the pseudoscience area. For example, Candace Owens. How many of you know her? That's all. Because, I mean, she's a fright, but she is hugely popular now in the US. Millions and millions and millions of followers. And she pontificates on all kinds of political issues, but she delves into some scientific things too. For example, she believes that the moon landing was fake. Now, as soon as you see something like this, you don't have to look any further, because someone who believes this nonsense will also believe all kinds of other nonsense. So, the rule is that if you find that someone has said something that is outrageously wrong, you got to be skeptical about everything that they say, because if you can say one wrong, then you can say two wrong. And she does. She tells us that global warming is not real. It is very real. The hottest 11 years have been within the last 12 years. So global warming is, of course, real. Bill Gates is a vaccine criminal. She actually believes that Gates somehow puts chips, microchips into vaccines. It's all nonsense. And some of it is absolutely outrageous. Mengelen's medical experiments are just bizarre propaganda. So she says that, the Nazis really didn't do all these awful things, whereas, of course, there's no question the evidence and all of this was done. So Candace Owens, who now is all over the news in the US with the political situation, has all of these bizarre views, all of it is misinformation. Another example of how people think that if you're famous, is Terrence Howard, the actor. Now, I must say that although I knew the name, I didn't know all that much about him until the recent controversies came up. But as you can see, he has been in really a very large number of movies, and much more than these. This is one selection. So he certainly is an actor who merits, his attention because of all the movies that he's been in. But anyway, he was a guest on Joe Rogan, which, as you may know, is the most popular podcast in the world, where you have something like 4 million people listening to him every day. That is a lot of people listening. Rogan is a former comedian, and he tends to, invite on famous people and have these long discussions, sometimes 3 hours long with them. So he had Terrence Howard on, and instead of talking about his acting career, etc., they get into his bizarre views on how the world works. And it's really hard to know even what to say about this. 1 times 1 equals 2 because the square root of 4 is 2. So what's the square root of 2? Should be 1, but we're told it's 2, and that cannot be. This is a meaningless word salad. I remember what happened the day I was born. Well, if he can't remember that, he's the only one in the world. And as you can see, you read the other things that will build a planet Saturn without gravity and build a Milky Way galaxy without gravity. Totally meaningless things. And needless to say, he's an anti-vaxxer. They refused vaccine because the government's history of chemical warfare against the citizens. I don't know what he's talking about. There's no chemical warfare against citizens. But anyway, there was quite an outcry about the outrageous things that he said. So Rogan actually invited a scientist, Eric Weinstein, who's a Harvard-trained mathematician, to talk about this. And he did counter a lot of it. He said that, this is mostly nonsense. But curiously, he also said that, yes, there were many things in history that at first were thought to be nonsense and were later proven to be true, such as, of course, the idea that the earth is the center of the universe, etc. Later, of course, proven to be true. So, but he kind of left it hanging, saying that, maybe this guy's saying outrageous things, but, let's not sweep it under the carpet, let's look at it, because in the past, sometimes outrageous things have come true. Except that we know the stuff that he has said. We know that it's nonsense. There's nothing to wait for here. None of that is going to come true. It's very curious that somehow we gave him credit for this. Athletes, of course, can also sway public opinion. When Aaron Rodgers leaked the information that he did not have a vaccine against COVID, and that rather he resorted to some homeopathic remedy, that of course got a great deal of publicity. And who knows how many people gave up the vaccine because Aaron Rodgers, superstar, did not take the vaccine and seemed to be perfectly fine. And in some of the explanations these people have, Alex Reed is one of these fighters, where they can do absolutely anything. It's a sort of a mix of boxing and wrestling, etc. So Alex Reed, as you can see, has some rather interesting ideas about energy. And then we have Shaquille O'Neal, who used to be a great basketball player and now is a great commentator on basketball. But see what he's wearing. He's wearing this power balance bracelet because he thought it gave him more energy and flexibility. What are these power bracelets? Nothing. They're pieces of plastic with a picture on it. But they do have a magical ingredient. Belief, the placebo effect. If you think it's going to do some good for you, it can. He's not the only one who believes it. There's David Beckham. We've seen him wearing one of these things. And it's still popular. You can buy it on the internet, and you'll see people making all kinds of claims about how much better they feel and how much more energy they have when they wear this bracelet. Not only is this scientifically impossible, but there's never even been a single publication attesting to its validity. But so far, we've been talking about actors and athletes, etc., who really are not educated in science, so maybe can have pity for them. But what about people who are properly educated, who then go astray, such as real physicians or real scientists? And this is where it becomes really troublesome, because they can be real big distractors, because they have a pedestal from where to speak. Whereas a food babe, of course, is essentially speaking from bottomless pits in terms of having any background knowledge. But doctors are educated. They know science. So how can some of this be? For example, Dr. Terry Madej, who is a proper physician. She's an osteopathic physician, graduated in the US, and in the US, osteopathic physicians are legitimate doctors. It's not like in Canada, where osteopaths really are just people taking some night courses in manipulating joints. In the US, they're real physicians. So here she is saying that the vaccine was an experiment on humanity, and that if you've gotten a vaccine or somehow were forced to take one, you better detox yourself. And so here is what she said. All you have to do is take a bath in baking soda, Epsom salt, bentonite clay, and borax. This is from a scientifically trained physician. Now, obviously, this was fodder for the cartoonists. And then borax, detox vaccine. It's hard to know, you don't want to say about nonsense like this, but she is not alone. There are numerous physicians who apply their nonsense on the internet. Christian Northrop, a former obstetrician gynecologist, is all over with her anti-vaccine stance, her notions that big pharma is collusion with the government to undermine the health of the public, etc. There's Carrie Maddox, who we just talked about, and Dr. Sherry Penton. She's a winner. This woman thinks that the vaccine was actually designed to depopulate the world. Now, why one would want to depopulate the world, who knows? And she also is one of the proponents of this microchip in the vaccine idea, and she claims that when you have this microchip in the vaccine, which of course is non-existent, it's total nonsense, that it also makes the body magnetic. And she has demonstrations of that. You can see the coin being stuck in the arm of someone who's supposed to have the vaccine. Well, I can also demonstrate magnetism, but I'll tell you that there is some trickery involved here, as there is in the case of this nonsense. If you have a bit of sweat on your body, you take a coin, push it onto your skin, it will stick. Now, sometimes stick permanently, but it will certainly stick long enough to have a picture taken. How anyone can believe this is what is surprising. But there are legions of followers of faith who absolutely guide their life by all nonsense and stupid. And of course, we can't talk about influencers, famous influencers, without bringing in Dr. Oz, who, of course, is a legitimately trained cardiac surgeon and knows the science, that's for sure. And you remember when he first appeared, I guess more than 10 years ago now, on Oprah, when she still had her daily show, he would, how many? He was 20 years? Yeah, this is possible. He would come on sometimes, for little segments, and he would tell you to eat fruits and vegetables, and eat lots of broccoli and exercise. He said all the right things, none of which was over the top. I mean, everyone knows that diet is important, fruits and vegetables are great. But anyway, and then something else happened, and Oprah basically gave him his own show, working behind the scenes. And when the show first started, it was actually quite good. He would have large blow-ups of the intestine and explain how it functioned. He'd have blow-ups of the lungs, and we would walk through and explain the bronchioli, etc., talk about lung disease. All of these things, of course, he knew because of his medical training. But then they realized that their audience, their afternoon audience, was mostly middle-aged, overweight women. That's who they had to cater to. So all of a sudden, we started to see all these little segments on the Dr. Oz show about dietary supplements to lose weight. And we heard about raspberry ketones, and sounded very scientific. Raspberry ketone causes fat cells to release a pectin, tricking the body into thinking it is thin. Of course, the average person would have no idea what those words mean, but they sound pretty good. The fact is that there's not a single study that have shown weight loss due to raspberry ketone. He went on to tell us that green coffee bean extract was the answer to weight loss. It is not, as you can see in this complaint by the Federal Trade Commission, that accused the companies making this particular product of overstating the case and had to be withdrawn from the market. But what really caused my disenchantment with Dr. Ross was when he promoted his homeopathic starter kit. Well, as I've told you repeatedly over the years, homeopathy is the most absurd of all of the so-called alternative regimens. It has no scientific basis. The idea of homeopathy is that you give a substance to a healthy person in increasing doses until it triggers some sort of symptom. And that substance will cure those symptoms in a sick person. This makes absolutely no sense, but this is a tenet of homeopathy. However, in order to use it as a treatment, you have to dilute the solution that was used to trigger the symptoms in a healthy person. And you dilute it to an extent that there's nothing left in there. Now, when homeopathy was first formulated over 200 years ago by Samuel Hahnemann, a German physician, they didn't know anything about molecules. They didn't understand that the dilution they were talking about was such that there was nothing of the original left. Because they were talking about 100-fold dilutions, meaning that you take your solution, you take 1 drop of water, add 99 drops of water. Take 1 drop of that, add 99 drops of water. Today we know that once you've done this 12 times, there's not a single molecule of the original left in there. So there's no way that this can have any kind of biological activity. It doesn't. What they then do is just take this solution which contains nothing and soak it into sugar pill. And that's your homeopathic remedy. The fact is what they're getting is just water, because there's no remnant of the original. Never mind the fact that the original would have had a therapeutic value anyway. So homeopathy was based on this idea, and they came up with a whole materia medica, where you have these little sugar pills that have been infused with all of these substances. Sometimes substances are truly bizarre, like X-rays. I don't know how on earth you would dilute an X-ray, but they tell you that this relieves itching or skin rash aggravated at night and in bed. Suppose if you have a skin rash during the day, this will work. And the most ridiculous one, perhaps, is Berlin Wall extract. How does this work? Because the Berlin Wall caused anxiety. No question, right? It caused anxiety in healthy people. So therefore, according to the 6 tenets of homeopathy, if you have someone who suffers from anxiety, then a dilute solution of Berlin Wall should be cured. Now, I don't know how you make a dilute solution of Berlin Wall, but it is there, as you can see. So there's also, I guess I should inform my friend, the food bay, that there's a homeopathic medicine that is based on beaver butt secretions, and that is castoreum. Of course, the 30C dilution means that it has been diluted 130 times. So obviously there's absolutely nothing in there, because there's nothing in there after this 12 dilutions. But it has a long-standing reputation in homeopathy for its efficacy in treating hysterical symptoms. Why? Because I suppose confronting beaver butt makes you hysterical, right? And therefore it should treat symptoms of hysteria. So it's no surprise that if you speak to physicians these days, they ask their patients not to come in with dreams of printouts from, Dr. Ross or what he may have said about health. He really, prior to the show being canceled, we started on the politics, he really was an actor playing the role of Dr. Ross. I think in the beginning there was legitimacy, they were trying to do good things, and then that just faded away. They just got for the titillating headline kind of stuff. I think he was just given script and just followed that script, including having to interview other misinformants like John Marcola, who is, I think, the biggest misinformant out there. He was introduced by Dr. Oz as the man your doctor doesn't want you to listen to for very good reason, because he talks complete nonsense. And he is really the champion spreader of misinformation, and he has been labeled as such, as you can see by the New York Times, because of all the outrageous things that he has said. He's been called the upside down doctor, because whatever legitimate science says, he says the opposite. And that always gets attention. And the FDA has gone after him for selling bogus treatments, including COVID treatments. He takes that specific one off the market then and just sells other alternatives. Then there are all the headlines he puts up every day. There's some garbage that comes from this Twitter every single day. And here are the headlines. Is there a plot to terminate human life in the next decade? Under the guise of communion, they want you microchipped, etc. It's really the striking stuff. And you think, who would believe this? But then you look at the 4 million followers he has. Obviously many of those believe this. And then all of this ends up with promoting some sort of dietary supplement that he sells. That is always how his articles end up. It's always got the solution. It's always simple, and it's always wrong. But people will buy it. Some of his outrageous ideas. You remember this episode of the Academy Awards? The so-called slapping and it was all because, according to Mercola, orchestrated. Since Jada Smith's wife, was actually suffering from alopecia areata, which is the loss of hair, so they think that Mercola thinks that all of this was orchestrated as a publicity stunt. Why? Because Pfizer, which was a manufacturer of a drug for alopecia, was one of the sponsors of the Academy Awards. So therefore, they orchestrated all of this to bring attention to the fact that they have a drug that is going to counter alopecia. He goes on to say that the existing medical establishment is responsible for killing and permanently injuring millions of Americans. It's quite an accusation. But again, his millions of followers buy into this. And as I said, he's the upside down doctor. He opposes vaccination, he opposes fluoridation, the use of dental amalgams, GMOs, mammography, non-stick cookware. Everything that science says we should be doing, he opposes. And then he wrote this absolutely outrageous commentary about Dr. Fauci, that he must be fired and arrested because he misled the nation. Again, total nonsense. This is a highly respected physician scientist, written hundreds and hundreds of articles, and an expert in allergies and immunology. Of course, during COVID, there were mistakes made. There were recommendations made that later turned out not to be correct. But that's to be expected when you're confronted with a new entity like COVID, which will do nothing, and you start collecting information. Well, sometimes, you go astray, because the information is all over the place, it's hard to come to conclusions. Hindsight is always easy. But most of the recommendations that we made were totally legitimate. But Mercola thinks that the vaccine is deadly, and there's something he called vaccine-acquired immune deficiency syndrome, which is totally made up. And this is why, I mean, I think that Mercola is the devil incarnate. And the fact that he's around and has such an ability to influence others, it's very scary. It tells us, of course, that he has no ulterior motive. No, it's not about money. It's all about just making sure that people get the right information. It is about money, because he's always trying to sell something. And he's acquired an immense fortune. He lives in a gigantic mansion. His net worth is said to be over 100 million. All of this from selling his supplements, most of which are absolutely useless, and from selling fake advice. So Mercola really is just an awful person. He's an evil man. And then there is the people's chemist, who was particularly troublesome for me, because he calls himself a chemist, which indeed he is. Shane Allison does have education in chemistry, and he did work for a pharmaceutical company. So this is true. He does have a master's degree in organic chemistry. He really was a pharmaceutical chemist, and he left that behind because he saw that this was not the way to go. He didn't want people taking drugs. Now, when you look into his history, it's not exactly easy to find out why he left pharmaceutical chemistry, but it certainly seems like he didn't do it voluntarily. It's hard to know exactly what happened, but when you piece together all the information that you can glean from the internet, it seems he was fired. That's a bit different story. But anyway, this guy thinks that we should all lead a chemical-free lifestyle. Now, this is bothersome coming from anybody, but especially bothersome from someone who has a background in chemistry. There's no such thing as being chemical-free. Of course, everything in the world is made up of chemicals. But what he claims is that we should give up drugs. Look at this. Time to ditch your meds. He talks about thyroid pills, antidepressants, no more cholesterol-lowering drugs, no more insulin. He wants diabetics not to use insulin. Now, this is dangerous stuff, obviously. What's the motivation? The same as Mercola, it's money. He's trying to sell things. Here's one. Testosterone primer. Well, it does have some sterols in there, for instance, salsipirol, but these don't have any kind of physiological effect. They do not boost testosterone. Then he's got this one here, called pre-workout. Faster, higher, stronger in 59 minutes without chemicals. 59 minutes. Not 58, not 60, but 59 minutes without chemicals. What is this? Well, all you have to do is look at the list of ingredients. Citrulline, tyrosine, hoffman extract. Are these not chemicals? What else would they be? Of course they are. There's no evidence that this particular blend does anything. But of course, there's plenty of evidence that these are chemicals. That's exactly what they are. To say that this is a chemical-free product is nonsense. He also tells us that viruses are not threats. They are part of a healthy immune system. Oh yeah? And that big pharma, an industry so big that they can make and sell vaccines for viruses that don't exist. The COVID-19 virus does exist. We have plenty of evidence for that. Plenty of people who have been sickened by it. But this treatment says there's nothing scientific about jabbing people with chemicals should stop to fight the common cold dressed as COVID-19. Now again, I wouldn't be really bothering to tell you about these leadings if they didn't have the mass following that they have. But like Mercola, he's got millions of followers. And you wonder how many of them gave up insulin and went into a diabetic coma because they were taking his supplements instead of insulin. He frames people against the vaccine using a tool that others use as well, taking a look at the components of a vaccine. And yes, these are tongue-twisting names. So obviously the food date will be certainly an anti-vaxxer, right? Because these are unpronounceable ingredients. But just because you can't pronounce them doesn't mean that you shouldn't be eating them. Vaccines are indeed very complicated mixtures scientifically put together because you need these ingredients for it to work. But he doesn't want us to be vaccinated. Instead, he wants us to feel better with his immune-stimulating and anti-allergy effects. So this is his alternative to vaccination. And again, you get kind of the scientific sounding language, including references. Now the thing is that most people do not look up the references, but I do. And it turns out that the references have nothing to do with the promotion. Yes, these references are to the particular herb that he's talking about, but it has nothing to do with boosting the human immune system. It's a completely different study of that herbal product. For this one here, different effects of coriander, which is the product he's fighting, but this is on the biochemical parameters of an immunity in broiler chicks, not in humans. So it is totally meaningless. Because when we talk about humans, what we want are clinical studies. We want people to undergo a regimen and be compared to those who are undergoing the placebo treatment, see whether or not there's any benefit. But the people's chemist or Mercola cannot provide any clinical benefits of all the products that they sell. Now this guy, the people's chemist, tells us that he was banned from Facebook, shut out on PayPal, etc. All that, of course, is true and should have been. So, but they always have like a back door. So now he started mailing out his straight talk to people. And in this compilation of nonsense, he of course claims that big pharma is the biggest risk. It's going to eat us up, but he is the one who is going to save us from the ravages of big pharma. The truth, of course, is that he is the shark who is going to basically feed on people's vulnerability. Unfortunately, these days, as I said at the beginning, we have an explosion of data. There's more of it coming at us every day. And the accumulation of data has outstripped our ability to analyze what that data means. Because there's so much stuff being published, it's hard to keep up. And it's really hard to analyze all of it. That's why it is more important than ever to have a proper filter system, to know which scientific studies are legitimate, which are not. We need to foster critical thinking. But it's a very difficult thing to do, because nonsense sells, as Jonathan Swift, the great British writer, told us, falsehood flies and truth comes limping after, right? Which is absolutely true, because myths make the headlines ahead of facts. So, it's more important now than ever to get rid of the BS. But it is a very tough thing to do, but we keep trying. And of course, you can get more of our stuff. Just go to our website. There's hundreds of articles there. So anyway, there's a glimpse for you into this world of information and misinformation, and how careful one has to be, because you can have pseudoscientific garbage that can be made to sound very, very legitimate. Yeah. Dr. Stephen Gundry is sort of in the Dr. Oz category, in the sense that he was a very, very highly respected cardiac surgeon, no question about it. He invented some cardiac assist device. And then for some reason he went rogue. Well, usually is the chance to make money. So he looked for a little niche. His niche was lectins, which are a type of protein present in beans and other grains, which again, these are the most evil things. And then he's branched out into other nonsense. So I wouldn't trust anything that Mohammed says. But it's just another example of someone who was legitimate, having gone astray. Yeah. There are, yeah. I mean, if you Google critical thinking, you'll get all of these lists. What one should look for, follow the money, and all this kind of thing. Look at the reputation of the journal where it was published. Look at the reputation of the authors of a paper. Yeah, there are lists of them. Yeah. Yeah, very good question. Yeah, it's the game of whack-a-mole. You whack one and it comes up somewhere else. That unfortunately is both what Health Canada and FDA are confronted with, because it's so easy for them. No, there is power. FDA has power to take things off the market. Health Canada also has that power. But unfortunately, the dietary supplement industry can put something out, and that will be marketed unless FDA decides to go after them and take it off the market. But there are just so many thousands of those different supplements that they can't go after all of them, that they don't have the manpower to do that. So they only go after the ones that turn out to be harmful. And generally with dietary supplements, that's rare. Most of them are benign nonsense. But in some cases where there was the danger, FDA does go after them. Also the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission in the US. It is. Yes, they send warning letters. And usually that results in changing of the wording by the criminal. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you judge someone not to against them, that is criminal. Unless, of course, it's the medical medium who says so, because then it's only the spirit who still do that part of the world. They're absolute con artists. But the world has always had con artists and always will have, and the world, it's a mushrooming empire. Yeah. Who is that? Barbara O'Neill. What is she? She's a legitimate physician. Mm-hmm. I'll take a look, but these people are a dime a dozen these days. I mean, there's nothing unusual about rogue physicians telling people to take all of this silly nonsense. But I'll have to look to see what their impact is. I mean, that's always the first thing to look at. You look at the number of followers they have. I mean, if they have a few hundred followers, and they're really doesn't matter if they know that. But, you know, many of them have hundreds of thousands, not millions of followers. Yeah. Prescription drugs. Yeah. Well, this of course is, you know, one of the curses in the U.S. is this, you know, the extreme idea that you can say anything that you want at any time, and that allows for all that advertising. Yeah, we don't have that in Canada, but we watch American TV, so of course you see that. Absolutely. And you know, with when you see these prescription drugs advertised on TV in the US, they do have to list all the side effects. And you wonder, you know, after listening to all of that, why would anyone ever consider taking that drug? Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. I mean, sometimes, you know, it's when you see some new headline, it's hard to know whether it's legitimate or not until you really start looking into it. But then you really need some scientific expertise to look into it. You know? I mean, unfortunately, a lot of these influencers are very good at what they do. They know how to use the right language. They know how to be seductive. And of course, when you have lots of ifs and maybes in your explanations, you skirt the law. Because if you don't say something conclusively, it's very hard to get after them. And you know, they have lawyers who check over their scripts. And, you know, we live in an age of misinformation. Yeah. It's a brand. Okay, well, we'll see you, I guess, in September.